Hi everyone. Welcome to this podcast, the simplest guide ever to launching your podcast. Earlier this evening, we started this as a live Google streaming event, and that didn't work out so well for me. So I decided just to record it locally, and then I'll upload it to YouTube, and we can take a look at it that way. All right. So the simplest guide ever to podcasting starts with these few simple steps. Number one, you have to have an audio file that will become your podcast. Many people are confused really by what a podcast is, and the truth is a podcast is an audio file that is available for syndication. And so by syndication, I mean you can subscribe to it on your podcast app or through some other file, much like you can subscribe to an RSS feed on your website. On a website, you can subscribe to the feed that you put out for your podcast. iTunes is a feed aggregator, if you want to think of it like that. The podcast store is, or the podcast app. And so what we want to be able to do is take an audio file and publish it somewhere that then gets submitted to iTunes so that people can consume that. And that's what we're going to do tonight. Now, the way we're going to do that involves these steps. Number one, we have to create an audio file. You can do that a couple of ways. The simplest way, you can just record straight to your computer. You don't even really have to have a mic or anything like that. If your computer has a mic, you can just open up the built-in audio recorder in Windows or Mac and just record from there. The next best way is to get a decent mic, and mics are anywhere from let's say $70 to thousands of dollars. I have a little one called a Blue Snowball, I think, that I bought for $60, and it sounds pretty good. I can even make it better if I lean closer and talk with a little better voice. It gets even better. But I'm fine with it just where it is, and I think it produces a pretty good sound. So if you are using Windows, you can record your audio using a free audio recorder, and this is what I would suggest, called Audacity. If you're on a Mac, then you can use GarageBand to record, and if you wanted to edit your audio. I don't particularly care to edit the audio that I produce at this point. You know, the thing with producing your podcast is that if you get hung up on having to edit the peaks and valleys of your audio for every podcast you record, you'll just get stuck. You'll get so hung up on trying to make it sound perfectly that you'll never actually hit publish and share that podcast with the world. So this simplest guide ever does not include anything that's going to tell you about how to optimize your recording sound so it sounds like it's straight off the radio. Instead, I just want to show you how to get it out there. And after you've published some, after you get into a routine of consistently publishing, then you can come back and start worrying about how to optimize the audio so that it sounds just perfect. So what I want to show you is how I record audio for things like podcasts, or even if I just wanted to throw up an audio file on my website, which I've done before, using Audacity for Windows. So again, Audacity is a free audio recording and editing app that you can download for Windows, and it's called Audacity. I'll include it in the post where I embed this video, and I'll put it in the YouTube description as well, so you know where you can download it. So I got it open right now, and I'm just going to open it and show you what it looks like. So this is what Audacity looks like, and to start with, I have made no changes to Audacity at all. This is just what it looks like to start. Now, what I'm going to do is come up here to these very common buttons. I mean, I think at this point, if you've been around long enough to know what VCRs are, you probably know what these buttons up here in the left-hand corner do. We've got pause, play, stop, go back to beginning, go to the end, and then record. And what I'm going to do real quick, I'm just going to go ahead and click record while I'm talking, just so that you can see how to create an audio file. And again, I didn't do anything except install this app and open it and click record, and it's recording my voice right now. So this, again, it's just an example. I have a real audio file that we're going to use as our example to actually publish to an iTunes feed, but I just wanted you to see how this works. So we can click stop, and then we can go back and play it. So you can see that it's just, it's following that the audio the whole way down. So once you've recorded your audio, now the thing about this is you can come in and edit this. You can come in and take little snippets of this out if you need to. You can cut pieces of this out. You can take entire tracks or pieces of the track and drag them around and that sort of thing. So you can do all of that in Audacity, and you can do the same thing in GarageBand if you're on a Mac. But I wanted to show you again the simplest way. Hit record, do your podcast, and publish. And eventually you're going to get into a routine where you're going to have time, you're going to feel more confident in what you're actually saying and publishing, so that when there's a time and a place for then coming back in and more professionally editing your audio. And you can do that, like I said, with Audacity or with GarageBand. So once you've recorded your audio here, what we want to do now is two things. You can go ahead and save this project, and that's just going to save it as an Audacity file so that you can come back later and edit it. But we also want to export this to, and I'm going to say just go ahead and export it as an MP3, though you can see you have lots of choices here. MP3 is I think the most accessible audio file type, and is certainly accepted by iTunes. So I'm just going to leave it as MP3, and then we're going to give this a name, and I'm just going to say this is test. You can look at the options, so you don't really need to change any of these. The way that it is straight out of the box is just fine. And then I'm just going to save it. You can fill out this metadata. You don't have to, so I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. Because when we actually publish this audio file on the website, on your website, you're going to be able to add additional information about that file right in the website. So that's it. Just now, I just saved that file. We can come back over here to this podcast folder that I have on my computer, and there it is right there, test MP3. That's that file that we just saved. And if I opened that file, it's going to play the audio that we just recorded. All right, so now you can see that's pretty simple. I mean, in and of itself, that's pretty simple. Use Audacity or GarageBand to actually record your audio, export it as an MP3, and it's that MP3 that we're then going to take and add to our website and submit to iTunes. So let's look at how we're going to do that. So I said earlier that a podcast is it's an aggregate of your audio feed on your site, if you want to think of it like that. So, or it doesn't have to be on your site, it's just anywhere that publishes an RSS feed for your audio. So what we want to do, what I suggest doing, is pushing out your podcast, pushing out your audio file directly from your website to iTunes using a plugin for WordPress called PowerPress. And what PowerPress does, it does two things for you. Number one, it walks you through the process of getting your audio, your overall audio files, your feed, of getting your audio feed ready to submit to iTunes, making sure that you have all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed in order to take this podcast feed URL that's going to be produced on your website and submit that URL to iTunes so that iTunes knows to check that URL anytime a new podcast is published. So let's go. I know it can sound a little bit technical, but it's really not. PowerPress, this plugin, walks you through all of these details. So here I am at My Name is Angie. I am relaunching this website after not using it for a long time. And so that's why it looks kind of blank right now. But let's log in and we're going to go to the dashboard. And again, the name of the plugin that we're going to install is called PowerPress. So I've already got it installed here, but I'm going to show you where you would go to install it if you didn't already have it installed. So if you didn't have it installed, you're going to log into your WordPress website, go to the dashboard, and then on the left-hand side, you're going to go to Plugins, and then you're going to go to Add New. Now this PowerPress plugin is free, and it already is in the WordPress repository. So we can search for it, and once we search for it, then we can install it directly in our site. So let's go ahead and search for it. PowerPress. You can see I just entered PowerPress in the upper right corner. And here it is right here, Blubrry PowerPress podcasting plugin. And again, I already have this installed, so I can't, you see I don't have this install now button like I do on these other ones because I already have it installed. But you would click install now here, and then once you've installed it, remember you have to activate it, because you can have plugins on your site that are installed, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily activated. So after you click install, you'll see a little blue link that says activate, and you want to go ahead and do that. So then once you've activated it, then you will have the same link that I have that says PowerPress on the left hand side. So let's go ahead and look at the settings for this. And like I said, the really great thing about this plugin is that it really walks you through all of the steps you need in order to publish your podcast feed. So here's something that you should know about hosting a podcast. So once you create that MP3 file, you have options. You can take that MP3 file and you can upload it into your WordPress website and serve it, the actual file, like onto your server, your hosting account. You can upload it through your WordPress website, and that audio file will actually live on your hosting account. So let's say your hosting account is with GoDaddy or Flywheel or WP Engine or something like that. That audio file is actually going to reside in your hosting account. And anytime someone wants to listen to that audio file, whether it's on or what to your podcast, whether they're listening directly in iTunes or whether they're listening to it on your website directly, that audio file is actually being served up from your hosting account, which is not necessarily, it's not awful, but the chances that your hosting account is well tuned for serving streaming video is pretty slim. And what can happen if you don't have a good hosting environment for serving streaming video or streaming audio is that the audio will start to play and then it will stop and it will have to catch up, and that sort of thing. So you have options. You can do that, and I have clients who have really great hosting, and so serving it up that way is okay. But also keep in mind that audio files, especially if you're doing a 15, 20, or an hour-minute podcast, the audio files themselves can get very large very quickly. And if you have many of them, that's going to take up the space in your hosting account very, very quickly. So those are also things to be considerate of. So what do? Again, if you have a good hosting account, if you have lots of space, if you feel like if it's well tuned for serving up audio or video, then that's a perfectly fine option for you. Another option is to use Blubrry's hosting service. So basically they do have servers that are well tuned for serving up audio. This is their business. They do podcasting hosting. And so you can purchase media hosting with Blubrry and host your audio files there. Now you don't have to do that in order to use this PowerPress plugin, but it's an option. And they actually gave me a nice demo account so that I could show you that as we're working through adding this today. So what I've done here is when you first install the plugin, all of this will look just the same for you. Nothing about this will look different. But so what I did was I click here to configure Blubrry statistics and hosting service, and then I entered my Blubrry username and password. And so now when I go to add audio later, which I'll show you, instead of pulling that file from my computer, this folder on my computer, instead of pulling that file and uploading that entire file to my WordPress installation and then serving that audio file from my own hosting account, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to take from this folder, and when I upload it to share it on my website, it's actually going to be hosted on Blubrry servers, which is really great because their servers are blazing fast for this sort of thing. So you just have options. You can do it either way. All right. So, and there is a cost to that hosting service. You can flip over, when you click that button, click here to configure Blubrry statistics excuse me, I'm already connected, so it's not going to show me the same screen. But if you were to click that button, then it would show you details about their hosting service, and then also their pricing structures. So having said that, let's keep going. So from here, what we want to do is begin filling out these settings. So we want to give our podcast a title. Now this title is the title for your entire podcast, not just for this one particular episode of your podcast that we're working on, but the entire thing. So my podcast name is going to be My Name is Angie. That's the name of my podcast. My Name is Angie. Same as this blog. That's it. So this would not be like, I wouldn't name this. Let's say that today, what we're doing right now with this video is an episode of my podcast. And so it might be The Simplest Guide to Podcasting Ever. That's an episode title. This is the program title. So it's just like on TV when you have a series. Let's say ER is the series, but every single episode has its own title too. This is the series title. This is what you want the entire thing to be called. So then you have to give it a subtitle. And I'm going to just say that mine is no, that's not right. What did I say? From my brain and heart to yours. So this is actually, so I'm just going to be honest, this is probably not a great subtitle. My subtitle probably should say something about family or faith or business or entrepreneurship in it. Your keywords that you want people to find you for should be in your subtitle as well as your summary. So these things I can go back and change later. So I'm just going to kind of write something here. So faith, family, fitness, business, and fun. That's just going to be my generic one. Listen, take advantage. You can have up to 4,000 characters in length here. Do that. Use as many of those characters as you possibly can, and make that summary really enticing. That I just wrote is not enticing. If you see that, you're going to think, oh, that's every podcast out there. So make that as specific and targeted to the person that you want to listen to that podcast as possible. So after that, then you have to choose a category, and the category is where you will appear when people are browsing iTunes. So if you look at iTunes, there are categories. Let me get to the podcasting app and I'll tell you what some of the categories are, and you can see them there. Actually, I guess I can just pull it down here. So you have a primary category, and you'll see like arts and design, business investing, education, and you can look all the way through these and find the one that just fits you best. So I'm actually going to go with, let's see, this is a good question, isn't it? It's somewhere between business management and marketing and kids and family. I'm going to go ahead and go with kids and family because I know what this is going to be about. So if you click additional categories, you can add additional categories. So that's what I'm going to do too. I'm going to add management and marketing, and I'm going to select a third category of, let's see, of fitness and nutrition. No, you know what? Let's make the third one faith and spirituality, because I think we'll talk about some of that there. All right, there we go. So if your podcast is explicit, like you're going to talk about dirty stuff or you're going to cuss a lot or that sort of thing, then go ahead and mark it explicit. Mine is not. Mine is clean. No explicit content. And that's true. I intend to have a clean podcast. So then here you have to enter your iTunes email address. So I know that mine is angie.meeker@gmail.com. And that's important. That's the email address that you're going to sign into iTunes with, and also where they're going to send you a notification when your podcast is accepted into the iTunes directory. So make that an email address that you can actually get access to. Now, the iTunes image. The iTunes image is the image that you're looking at when you're browsing through the iTunes podcast directory. It might be used elsewhere too, like if you were to decide to well, like the Blueberry directory is one example of a place where it might be shown. There are lots of places on the internet where people aggregate podcast feeds, and that image might be part of where that would be shown. So, okay, so what we want to do here is you have to paste in the URL of where your image lives. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm actually going to go to media and add new, and I'm just going to serve it from here. You can go in and add it directly to the root folder of your domain. That's okay too. I just, for this purpose, I'm just going to go ahead and add it here. And then I'll get the URL directly from my WordPress installation. So I've got it under desktop and then podcast. I think I'm getting a cold. And then this picture here is my, I can show it to you real big. You tell me what you think of it. See this, my name is Angie with Angie Meeker, and then down at the very bottom it says family, friends, faith, fitness, and business. So this is my image that, and I'm going to actually rename this real quick. I want to call it iTunes. And, yep, all right. So now that let's refresh that and we'll grab that iTunes. So it's uploading right now. They do suggest, not suggest, but your image has to be at least 1400 by 1400 pixels wide and high. So just make sure that you keep that in mind when you're editing your image or when you're creating your image. If you don't have any graphics program, you can use something like Canva, canva.com to create that. So once we add that image through our media library, we can go ahead and get the URL of that image over here on the left. And if I went too quickly to do that, you can rewind and watch it again. So I uploaded the image. Once I've uploaded it, then I can get the URL of the image over here where it says file URL. So let's go ahead and come back to our PowerPress settings, and we're going to paste that in. All right. So that is pasted in. Now, I want you to keep note of what this says. If you change the iTunes image without changing the file name, it may take time, days or even months, for iTunes to update the image in the podcast directory. So what that means is if you are adding a different image, like if I were to change my mind later and say I wanted like a purple background to that image, when I reload it, when I add in the new URL of that image, I want to make sure I change the name of that image, and iTunes will pick it up more quickly. You can also just say right here that you want to upload a new image. And PowerPress is great. Look at this. Using this option should update your image on iTunes within 24 hours. Now, I don't need to choose that because I'm not re-updating one. I'm just updating what I already have. I'm just adding what I already have for the first time. So the next settings in PowerPress are where you would like for your podcast player and links to like download your podcast if you're going to allow people to download it, where you want those to appear. Do you want them to appear below your page content? So let's say that each page on your site that has the podcast available for people to listen to, you also write like a short description of that podcast, and then the podcast player is below that. Honestly, I'd have to test it and see which one works best as far as people actually clicking the media player to listen to it. I'm going to put mine above the page content because to me, if someone's coming to listen to a podcast, I want them to have it as quickly as possible. So I'm going to say above the page content. And I do not want to display media links and excerpts. I don't want to do that. So that would mean that if someone was looking at like an archive of actually, yeah, I do want to do that. Do I want to display the media links in the WordPress excerpts? And for me, I guess I do, because if someone was looking at an excerpt of all of my or an archive of all of my podcast posts on my site, I would want the podcast player to display in those archives so they didn't have to open up the individual podcast in order to listen to that podcast, but they could just listen from the archives page. And I'll show you an example of someone who does this. So let's go to smartpassiveincome.com. And also this website, smartpassiveincome.com, is from a guy named Pat Flynn. And he has a really good, much more in-depth tutorial on how to get started podcasting. And he also has his own podcast player, which is pretty beautiful. So, all right. So here's an archive of his podcast. And I think if we look down, oh, no, sorry, I have to get to the actual podcast. All right, podcast, here we go. Now we're looking at the category on his site, which displays podcasts one right after the other. So here we go. Here's what I'm saying. So right here is his podcast player. It's just taking a second to load. Here is his podcast player. If we come a little farther down to the next, why is that taking a minute to scroll down? Well, if we scroll down to the next excerpt on this page, you'll see that, there we go. There's the first one. Okay, so here's what I'm saying. You can see as we scroll through his archive of podcast posts on his site that the player displays in the excerpt of that article. So you can just come onto this one page with all of his podcasts and just listen to them one right after the other, or you can click into the post and listen to that podcast directly on that page. So that setting that says display media links and WordPress excerpts, my answer is yes, I do want to do that. No, everything is working. You don't need to do anything with that unless you're having issues, which you're not. And these advanced options to get started with, we're going to leave them just like they are, but I'll explain to you what some of them are. So you can have categories of podcasting on your site, each with a different feed. So let's say that I wanted to take my one podcast and I wanted to break it up into episodes that I mark as being specific to business. And then I wanted to publish a My Name is Angie business podcast using just that particular category. Well, you can do that. So we're not going to do that today. These settings are actually really, really cool. I mean, take a minute to read through each one of these learn mores because they're really, really cool. And I actually haven't even used this PowerPress playlist player. I'd really actually like to learn more about it. So I'm going to open that in a window real quick and see what that looks like. I wonder if they have an example of it on this page. Nope, they don't. All right, I'll have to play around with that and see what that is because that looks cool. All right, so what else do we need to do? We need to, I think I already linked to my Blueberry account. So I'm just going to save changes. So those are the first things that you have to do. Fill out those settings. Now, this does not, just filling out those settings does not publish your feed to iTunes. The next thing you have to do, and what's great about PowerPress is that it tells you, first, fill out the settings. Second, create a blog post with an episode. And if you click on this, it will even open up, it will give you an example of how to do that. So, but what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go over here to post, and we're just going to add, I'll show you what has happened now that we've activated this plugin and set it up. So post, if you're familiar with WordPress at all, post is typically where you go to add a blog post. Well, you can do that, but what we want to do first is we're going to add a category on our site called podcast. And every podcast we create, I'm just going to assign it to that particular category. All right, so now we're going to click Add New, and I'll explain what that's for later in just a few minutes. So we're going to say Add New, Post, Add New Post. Now what you'll see if you scroll down quite a bit through the settings, and your page may look a little different than this just because you have theme settings or that sort of thing here. I do, so I'm just going to close that and close that because that's all theme dependent. All right, so down at the very bottom of your screen now, for every type of post on your site, you're going to see this section that says, this meta box that says podcast episode. Now for me, I can click this little icon, or I can say link to media hosted on Blueberry. So if I click that link to media hosted on Blueberry, I don't, let's see, hold on. I want it to come up just so I make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. I don't have any media hosted on Blueberry yet because I haven't uploaded anything. So if I click on that, I'm going to choose this option that says upload media file. I think. Yep, that's right. Okay, so from here, then I'm going to say select file. And then I'm going to go and I'm just going to grab this file called Grandma K just as an example. And again, that's an MP3 file. And it's going to upload it. Now, what my installation is doing is taking that file from my website, and instead of uploading it to my own hosting account, it's uploading it to Blueberry's hosting account. Again, you don't have to use this Blueberry hosting account. I just think it's a good idea. If you didn't have your PowerPress installation connected to Blueberry's hosting account, then when you went to click this button that looks like a folder, or when you went to click this button that looks like a folder, it would take you to your desktop and you would upload a file directly from your desktop. And then once you uploaded it, it's going to add it to your hosting account and it's going to serve that file from there. So your interface will look just a tiny bit different as you click through those screens after you click the file to upload a podcast, but that's okay. So it just is going to look a little bit different. So you can choose to auto detect the file size, and you can choose to auto detect the duration. So I'm going to go ahead and say verify the URL. Once I verify the URL, then you'll see that those settings are automatically detected, and that verify URL will be available whether you choose Blueberry hosting or you choose to host your audio and media on your own hosting account. So if that looks just about correct to you, you can go ahead and leave it that way, or you can specify the size and the length. That looks correct to me. That looks about right. So let's come back up to the top here and we're going to title this. I'm just going to call this Tribute to Grandma K as an example. So you would give this a title, and that Tribute to Grandma K becomes the title of your podcast. And then we can add our description here. Now this grandma where I'm writing right now, that's actually content that's going to display on your site itself. So I'm going to say Grandma K was a lovely lady. And I'm going to put it in the podcast category just because. So everything else is set up here. That's all. And I'm going to go ahead and click publish. So I still need to minimize these things. Now if we come back down to our podcast episode, you have the option to modify the existing episode that you just created. I don't really want to modify any of it. I'm okay with just leaving it just like it is, but you can choose to modify it. All right, so now we've created a podcast that has, let me make sure all my screen options were showing. Okay, good. We've created a podcast on our site that now is part of a feed that can be published to iTunes. So let's come back to our PowerPress settings and see what it's telling us now. So see, now we've got a check mark by create a blog post with an episode. So I'm going to go ahead and click this create a blog post with an episode just to double check that we've done everything correctly. It's been a while since I've used this and sometimes they add things. So create your episode media. That's right. So we did all of that. We created a new blog post. Treat the blog post title as your podcast episode title. Do you see that there? Which we did that too because we named it Tribute to Grandma K. The body content of your blog post is also your episode show notes. Okay, so let's make sure that you hear that because I said it earlier when I was creating the blog post, but I want to make sure that you hear it. So the information that you enter in your content for that blog post becomes the episode show notes that's published through directories like iTunes and things like that. So that description needs to have the keywords that you want that episode to be found for, both on if someone was searching the iTunes directory, but also if they're just plain searching the internet. So just because you have audio that relates to the content that you want to be found for doesn't mean that you don't need show notes, because search engines don't read audio. Search engines read text. And so if you have a podcast that's, let's say, all about fitness, but you never include show notes, you're not doing yourself any favors with SEO. You need to have show notes. And also for accessibility purposes, some people can't always sit down and listen to an audio file, but they can read through your show notes and find out for sure what that episode is about. It's also good just for people who want to, they want to know in general, what are you talking about this episode, before they go and listen to 25 minutes or an hour of you talking about something that later they found out was not even important to them. All right, so we've created a blog post with an episode. And now what we want to do is submit your feed to iTunes or other podcast directories. So let's scroll down just a little bit. Okay, so hold on just a second. There we go, right there. So right here, as we scroll down, right below our program title, and this area was not here before we published that blog post with podcast. This is a new section that became apparent once we published that podcast. So here's what we want. You can see this. I'm going to walk through this because this is really important. Click the following link to publish a podcast on iTunes. iTunes will email your subscription URL to the iTunes email entered below, which for me was angie.meeker@gmail.com, when your podcast is accepted into the directory. The recommended feed to submit to iTunes is right here. So you see, for me, it says my name is angie.com/feed/podcast. That structure is going to be pretty much the same for every site. It's going to be http your domain /feed/podcast. So that's the URL that we're going to submit to iTunes, and we're going to go ahead and do it. Now I know that, earlier today I went to publish this. I went to make sure that these links went to the right place in iTunes, and it did not. So I pulled it up the same place that we need to go, but let's go ahead and just check it and see. I think it does not go to the right place right now. Connecting to the iTunes store. You do have to have iTunes connected to, you have to have it downloaded on your computer and be logged in order for this to work well. So just now that didn't go where I think it needs to go, and so I want to show you where it should go. So instead of following that link, listen to what I'm saying. Now these instructions are also up here. If you click on the submit your feed to iTunes, you can also find these detailed instructions, but I want to show you. So just now I clicked on that link that said iTunes subscription URL, and this is the page that it sent me to. Now again, this is not the simplest way to get to it. So instead, I've got iTunes open down here, and this is the store. Okay, so if you're familiar at all with iTunes, you know that once you log in, you have lots of different choices. You can look at music or movies, TV shows, App Store, books, and look, here's podcast. So that's what we want. We want to get into podcast once we're logged into iTunes. And then over here on the right-hand side, there's a link that says submit a podcast. So that's what we're going to click on. And it says submit podcast to the iTunes directory. So that URL that we're going to paste right here is the URL that PowerPress provided for us. So this URL right here, see it says recommended feed to submit to iTunes. That's the URL you want to submit. So let me get back to iTunes. We're going to paste it in right there, and then I'm going to say continue. Now it's going to say sign in to publish your podcast. You have to enter your Apple ID and password. Again, if you have an iTunes account, you have an Apple ID and password. And also if you have an iPhone, you have one too. That's what you have to use in order to download your apps and things like that. So my Apple ID is right there, and I entered my password, and now I'm going to say continue. So what you should know is that it takes, once you're podcast is submitted to the iTunes podcast directory, it takes a few days for it to be approved. And if it's not approved, you'll get a notice. So just now, mine says it needs to be hosted on a server that allows HTTP head requests. So I imagine that's probably the problem. Let me go back and see if I can fix that real quick. So it's possible that, let's see, I wonder if I can add it directly to my hosting account. I think I can. Let me pause this and make sure that I can get, I'm going to pause the recording and come back in just a minute. I think. Okay, I think the issue was that my image was too large. I had it at like 5,000 pixels by 5,000, and it needs to be between 1,400 by 1,400 and 3,000 by 3,000. So let's see if that fixed it. If not, then I maybe need to host it in a different place, but I think that should fix it. All right, there we go. So you can see now that the name of the podcast is My Name is Angie. The author is My Name is Angie. That's me. The short description is there. The long description is there. The kids and family category is there. It says English and that it's clean. So I'm going to go ahead and submit it. Again, this information can be edited later if you need to change it. You just go back into your PowerPress settings and edit it, and then the next time your feed is published, iTunes will update that information. So I'm going to go ahead and submit it. And that's it. Thank you for submitting this podcast to the iTunes store. It says, it's not going to appear immediately. It may be reviewed after being posted. So here's what's going to happen from here. And I can't show you this part because it takes a few days. So you can see submit your feed to other iTunes and podcast directories. So we have submitted it, but what is going to happen is that if it's approved, iTunes is going to email to the address that we use down, to the address that we set as our iTunes email address. They're going to email a long URL like this, and that's the address where this podcast can be subscribed to directly in iTunes. So once it's approved, they'll give you a link, and you need to come and paste that link in here so that your website knows where that can be subscribed to. So that's the last step. That's really the last step in publishing your podcast feed to iTunes. So just real quickly, I know I mentioned earlier that it's been a while since I have used this, but I want to look at the podcasting SEO settings, and then we'll go back and we'll look at the actual post that we published earlier so that you can see what this looks like on the front side of the site. Right, okay, so this is exactly what I hoped it would be. So this said specify custom episode titles for podcast feeds. So as a default, the title of your post, so let's see, let me show you. By default, the title of your post is the title of your podcast feed, or the title of that episode for the podcast. You might not want that. That might not be the best option. Like for this, we said tribute to Grandma Kay, and that's the post title that's going to show up on our site. It's also going to be the episode title, and that may work, that may not work for you. So like here for Pat Flynn's podcast, he's been doing this for a really long time, so he titles it by number and then the title of the episode. And when you look at his podcast in iTunes, that's the same exact way that episode is listed. So that may work for you, that may not work for you. But if you say, you know what, I want to be able to title my episode something different than I title my post where I share that podcast, then you can do that if you check this checkbox under SEO options that says specify custom episode titles for podcast feeds, and you can do that, and then it gives you options. Do you want the feed episode title to replace the post title, which is exactly what typically happens? Do you want the episode title to go before the post title? Do you want it to go after the post title? Do you even want to append the show title to episode titles, which would mean, oh, and great, they gave you an example right here. So for example, the title of your blog post would come before the title of your episode. You can do that if you want to. I don't want to do any of this actually. When I publish mine, I actually want to highlight fields for iTunes SEO. I do want to do this one, this iTunes SEO guidance. I do want to do that one because it's going to let me change things like the author field. So if I had, let's say I had a guest with me on my show and I wanted to help attribute that podcast to that particular guest, then I might change the author field or that sort of thing. All right. So you can check that on yours if you want to. You don't have to. All right, we're going to come down to the audio players in PowerPress, and we're just going to look through the settings on that. Again, what's great about PowerPress is that if you just follow the instructions, most of the stuff is pretty simple. I mean, it's taken, with me giving little explanations of what things are, we're only in 45 minutes, and we already have our podcast submitted to iTunes. So this is the default media player with that comes with basically the WordPress default media player. Looks like this. So that's kind of nice actually. I really like this version of it. I think that this is a Flash player, so I actually really liked this version of it. I wish it didn't go away, but this version up here is the best version. I liked the look of this one. But this is the one that is just great. So we're going to go ahead and just use that one. It seems like it works best. It's HTML5. It works, which means it will work on different devices, on mobile devices and that sort of thing. So we're going to leave it blank because we want it to take up the maximum width of the poster page where that media is embedded. So you can see when we look at this post, it's taking up the full width of this post that we have published, which I like it. I like the look of it when it takes up the full width. You don't have to leave it like that. If you wanted it to only be like half the width, you could do that too. I just like it when it's the full width. And that's it. And so you would save changes. We didn't really make any changes, so I'm not going to save those changes. Now what's interesting is that you can also add video. You can do video podcasting with this same plugin. And the only difference is that when you add your file, like when we added the file here in Tribute to Grandma Kay, instead of adding an MP3 file, you would add a movie file. And by movie file, I mean any type of approved video file. So MP, what would that be? Like the most common ones are MP4. No, MPEG-4. Is it, what did it say? MP4? MPEGs, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you would add an approved video file there, and then it would show the video player. So I think that's pretty great. Some people do video podcasting, which just means basically that instead of recording just audio, they record video and then they publish that video. And iTunes, that's okay. iTunes can get that video too. There are video podcasts in iTunes and there are audio only podcasts. So you can use either one. All right. So let's go back to the front now, and this is the podcast that we published on our site. So even before your podcast is accepted to iTunes and you get that subscription URL, you can publish podcasts directly to your website. Or if you say, you know what, I don't even want to be in the iTunes directory. I don't know why you would not want to be in the iTunes directory, but if you did, then you could just go ahead and publish audio to your site this way, and that'd be just fine. So this is what it will look like. Remember, I said that I wanted the player to appear at the top of my content, and so that's why you see the title and then date and things like that I have set to show, and then you see the podcast player right away, and then you see the content, which was Grandma Kay was a lovely lady. Now, you could have set it to where the podcast would display down here, down below the content, or you can even manually insert it in your let me see if they gave us there is a way, I don't know what it is right off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but there is a way to manually insert that player in your post. So that's pretty much it. I mean, the only thing that we're waiting for at this point is that subscription URL from iTunes. And again, that can take up to a few days to have that podcast approved in iTunes. Once it's approved, publish to your little heart's content. And you would do that just by saying post, add new. And then again, this would be like your episode title, because remember, the blog post title becomes your episode title. You would add your content here, which becomes your show notes. And then further down, you would click your file upload here. That's either going to take you directly to your desktop, or it's going to take you to your desktop to upload to Blubrry hosting if you should decide to do that. Once you've uploaded there, click verify URL so that we get these detected file size and duration. Excuse me. Oh, you know what? I missed a part along the way that I want to make sure I tell you. Go ahead and mark this as being in your podcast category, and that's mostly so that when people are looking at the front end of the site, let me see. Oh yeah, here's an easy way to get to it. When you have then a way of displaying an archive of all of your podcasts on your site directly. Of course, people can go to iTunes and subscribe and be able to view all of your podcasts that way. But if you want them to be able to view it on your site, then put it in the category podcast, and then you'll be able to see this URL appear as my domain, and then category, and then podcast. And you'll be able to send people directly to that archive in order to view all of your podcasts. So there was one thing I forgot to mention earlier, and I should have. So you want to set a featured image for each podcast, because each individual podcast that you publish, each episode that you publish, podcasters probably think that's the same thing as saying I'm gonna post a blog today, which drives us bloggers nuts. Anyway, okay, so you want to set a featured image because your overall podcast has an image, which for me was, I'll show you again one more time. Hold on. The overall podcast has an image, which for me is this image here, but then each individual episode also has an image, and the way to set that individual episode image is to set the featured image here. So when you set your featured image, I'm going to go ahead and say Simplest Podcast Ever as my featured image, even though I know that that is the wrong size for iTunes. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, and then I would click publish. And then once that publishes, if I had the an audio file here, it would publish as a podcast. If you don't fill out any of this, if you don't add a media file here to your post that you're publishing, that's okay. It will not, that doesn't mean that every single post on your site becomes a podcast. Only the post where you add the media file and complete all of this and publish it adds to your iTunes feed or to the feed of your podcast. So that's it, really. I mean, that's kind of the basics of how to get started podcasting. Again, you have to have an audio file recorded. You can use Audacity or GarageBand to do that. Install PowerPress and walk through those settings. Once you've installed PowerPress and walked through the settings, you have to actually create a post on your site with an audio file as your first episode. Once you've done that, then you can submit your feed to iTunes, and after that you have to wait a few days for iTunes to approve it. Once they've approved it, then you take that subscription URL that they give you and you add it back to your PowerPress settings. Then you'll see a new link here that says subscribe in iTunes right next to all of this. So that's it. That's all that is involved in publishing your podcast. I don't think that's really, I think that's a lot simpler than most people think it is. But there are a few little technical details along the way. So I hope that you enjoyed this and were able to follow along. And really, again, I did not script any of this. I didn't plan any of this ahead of time. So I know it might have been a little crazy to follow it at times. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask in the comments because I really will answer. Thanks, everyone. Again, this is Angie, and at mynameIsAngie.com. And once my podcast feed gets published, then I'd really love if you would subscribe to that podcast on iTunes. You'll be able to search for mynameIsAngie.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great, great night.